3 months after sending the message, Dr. Amanda Price was working late in her laboratory when every computer in the building started making noise at the same time. The Zalari had answered. The response came as a massive data burst that made human communication systems overload. It took 2 days just to download all the information and another week to realize what they had received. The aliens had sent them a complete language database, star charts, and detailed information about their civilization. Amanda called in her best team. Dr. Ryan Cooper was a physicist who understood quantum mechanics better than almost anyone on Earth. Kate Sullivan was an engineer who could build anything if given enough time and materials. Together they began the most important translation project in human history. The Zalari were not like humans. They were beings made of living crystal who thought in ways that were both logical and beautiful. Their language was based on harmonic frequencies that created meaning through tone and rhythm. Learning to understand them was like learning to hear music in mathematics. Slowly, the full message became clear. The Zalari had been fighting a war for over 300 years against something they called the Devourers. These were not living beings, but ancient machines that had one purpose: to consume everything they found and make more of themselves. The Devourers moved from star system to star system like a plague. They would arrive at a world and begin breaking it down atom by atom. Everything they consumed became part of their growing fleet. Planets, stars, entire civilizations. Nothing could stop them for long. The Zalari had been the strongest military force in their part of the galaxy. They had great crystal ships that could bend space and weapons that could crack moons, but none of it mattered against the Devourers. Every time they destroyed one Devourer ship, 3 more would be built from the wreckage. 17 different alien civilizations had tried to fight the Devourers. All of them had been completely destroyed. The Zalari were the last organized resistance left, and their home world of Christhia was running out of time. They say the Devourers will reach their main world in less than a year, Ryan said, looking up from his translation work. They are asking if we have any weapons or technology that might help. Amanda felt sad and angry at the same time. Here were people who had been fighting to save not just themselves, but everyone in the galaxy. They had been alone for centuries, watching their friends die, and still they kept fighting. "What do we tell them?" Kate asked. "Our best weapons would be like throwing rocks at a mountain. Our fastest ships would take thousands of years to reach them." Amanda thought about this problem for days. Earth's technology was primitive compared to what the Zalari described. Humans had barely learned to travel between nearby stars, while the Zalari could cross their entire galaxy. Human weapons were crude metal and explosives, while the Zalari had mastered energy itself. But humans had something else. They had a willingness to try impossible things. They had a history of finding solutions when there seemed to be no hope. Most importantly, they did not give up on people who asked for help. Amanda took her idea to Admiral Morrison. She found him in the war room, surrounded by maps of human space and reports from the outer colonies. "Admiral," she said, "I want to send a ship to help the Zalari." Morrison looked at her like she had lost her mind. "Dr. Price, even our fastest experimental ships would take over 1,000 years to reach them. The war will be over before we even get close." "What if we could find a faster way?" Amanda asked. "The Zalari have sent us their complete scientific database. Maybe there is something in there we can use." "Even if there was," Morrison said, "we are talking about technology that is hundreds of years ahead of ours. We cannot just build alien Machines overnight, Amanda smiled. Maybe we cannot build their machines, but maybe we can build something better. Humans have always been good at taking ideas and making them work in new ways. Morrison was quiet for a long time. He knew that Amanda was one of the smartest people on Earth. If she thought there was a chance, maybe there was. What exactly are you proposing? He asked. Give me 6 months and our best scientists, Amanda said. Let us study everything the Zalari sent us. If we cannot find a way to help them, then at least we will have tried. Morrison agreed, but he was not hopeful. He gave Amanda access to the best research facilities on Earth and told her she could have any scientist she wanted. What he did not expect was how many people volunteered to help. When word spread about the Zalari and their fight against the Devourers, thousands of scientists and engineers asked to join the project. They worked day and night, studying alien technology and trying to understand principles that were far beyond current human knowledge. Captain Ben Torres was one of the volunteers. He commanded the exploration ship Endeavour, which was one of humanity's most advanced vessels. When he heard about the project, he immediately offered his ship and crew for any mission that might help. Ben was a career explorer who had spent his life pushing the boundaries of human space. He had discovered 3 new worlds and survived more dangers than most people could imagine. But this was different. This was not about expanding human territory or finding new resources. This was about helping people who were dying far away, in the darkness. If we find a way to reach them, he told Amanda, my crew and I want to be the ones who go. Amanda was moved by his offer, but she was also worried. Captain, we do not even know if it is possible yet. And if we do find a way, it will probably be very dangerous. Ben smiled. Doctor, my crew and I knew the job was dangerous when we signed up. We explore space because someone has to be first. If there is a way to help the Zalari, we want to try it. As the months passed, more volunteers came forward. Pilots offered to fly untested ships. Engineers offered to build experimental technology. Soldiers offered to fight an enemy they had never seen. Word of the Zalari's struggle had touched something deep in the human spirit. Dr. Price worked 18-hour days, trying to understand alien science that was based on completely different principles than human technology. The Zalari used crystal matrices that could manipulate space and time. They had weapons that could destroy matter at the quantum level. Their ships could travel faster than light by riding waves in something they called the deep current. But the more Amanda learned about Zalari technology, the more she understood why they were losing. The Zalari were excellent scientists and engineers, but they thought in terms of perfection and precision. Every system had to be exactly right before they would use it. Humans were different. They were willing to try things that were dangerous and uncertain. They could take a half-finished idea and make it work through determination and creativity. Maybe that was what the Zalari needed, not perfect technology, but human ingenuity. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A young physicist named Elena Rodriguez was studying the Zalari data on space travel when she noticed something. The alien ships used one method to fold space, but there were references to other, older techniques that the Zalari had abandoned because they were too risky. What if we do not try to copy their current technology? Elena suggested. What if we use the old methods they stopped using? Humans are better at handling risk than most species. Amanda looked at Elena's work and felt excitement building in her chest. The abandoned Zalari technique was based on temporarily shifting a ship into a different dimension where the rules of physics were different. It was incredibly dangerous. and required split-second timing, but it could theoretically allow almost instantaneous travel across vast distances. The Zalari stopped using this because too many of their ships were lost during the transition, Amanda explained to Admiral Morrison. But maybe humans can succeed where they failed. We are used to taking calculated risks. Morrison studied the plans Elena had developed. They were complex and frightening, but they offered hope. How long would it take to build a ship with this technology? 6 months. If we have unlimited resources and the best people working on it, Amanda said. Morrison made his decision. You have whatever you need. Build the ship. Humanity was going to answer the Zalari's call for help, no matter how dangerous the journey might be. Lisa Blake rubbed her tired eyes and looked at the screen again. The numbers were still there, blinking in the darkness of the monitoring station. She had been working the night shift on Aurora Base for 3 years, and she had never seen anything like this. The signal came from deep space, far beyond any human colony. It was not random noise from a star or the usual chatter from mining ships. This was different. The pattern was too complex, too organized. It reminded her of music, but not any music humans made. Computer, run analysis on signal 774, she said. The artificial intelligence responded in its calm voice. Signal shows quantum burst transmission. Origin point approximately 847 light-years from Earth. Pattern suggests intelligent design. Lisa felt her heart beat faster. 847 light-years. That was farther than humans had ever traveled. No human ship could go that far. But something out there was sending a message. She recorded everything and started working on the signal. Hour after hour, she tried to understand what it meant. The mathematics were strange but beautiful. There were numbers that seemed to represent star positions. There were other parts that looked like they might be words, but in no language she knew. By morning, Lisa had made some progress. The signal contained coordinates to a star system she could identify on the star maps. But more importantly, parts of the message repeated in a way that made her think of crying. Someone out there was asking for help. When her supervisor, Commander Rick Stone, arrived for the day shift, Lisa showed him everything. Rick was a careful man who did not believe in aliens. He looked at her work with doubt in his eyes. This could be anything, he said. Maybe it is just noise from a pulsar we have not seen before. No, sir, Lisa said. Look at this part here. These numbers repeat every few minutes, but they change slightly each time. It is like a countdown. And here, this section has the same mathematical base as our own number system, but it is more advanced. Rick frowned. He did not want to believe it, but Lisa was the best communications officer on the station. If she said this was artificial, maybe it was. Send it to Earth Command, he said finally. Let them decide what to do. The signal reached Earth Command 2 days later. Admiral Jack Morrison read the report while drinking his morning coffee. He was a practical man who had spent 30 years in space, and he had seen many false alarms. Every few months, someone claimed they had found proof of alien life. It was always something else. But this report was different. It came from Lisa Blake, and she was known for being careful and smart. Morrison decided to send it to the science division. Dr. Amanda Price was in her lab when the message arrived. She was humanity's best expert on languages and communication. She had spent her life studying how different cultures talk to each other. When she saw Lisa's discovery, she knew immediately that it was real. The mathematical patterns were too complex to be natural. The way the signal was built showed intelligence that was different from human thinking, but still logical. Most importantly, the emotional tone of the message was clear even across the vast differences between species. Amanda worked for 3 days without stopping. She slept in her lab and forgot to eat. Slowly, the alien message began to make sense. It was a distress call, but not just any distress call. It was a warning and a plea for help from beings who called themselves the Zalari. The Zalari were under attack. Something called the Devourers was destroying their worlds and killing their people. The Zalari had been fighting for hundreds of years, but they were losing. Soon, they would all be dead. Amanda took her translation to Admiral Morrison. She found him in his office, looking tired and worried. The weight of protecting humanity was always on his shoulders.
"Admiral," she said, "this message is real. There are aliens out there, and they need our help."
Morrison looked at the papers she handed him.
"Dr. Price, even if this is real, what can we do? Our fastest ships would take thousands of years to
reach them. By the time we got there, whatever is happening would be long over." Amanda had expected this response. "Sir, we have to try. This is the first contact with alien life in human history. We cannot just ignore their call for help." "And what exactly are you suggesting we do?" Morrison asked. "We send a message back," Amanda said. "We let them know that humanity received their call. We tell them that we want to help. Maybe they have technology that could make the journey possible. Maybe together we can find a solution." Morrison was quiet for a long time. He thought about all the things that could go wrong. What if the aliens were hostile? What if this was a trap? What if responding to the message brought danger to Earth? But he also thought about what it meant to be human. Throughout history, humans had always tried to help those in need. When someone called for help, humans answered. It was part of what made them who they were. "All right," he said finally. "Prepare a response, but keep it simple. Tell them we received their message, and that we want to help. Do not give them any information about Earth's location or our military capabilities." Amanda smiled. "Yes, sir. I will prepare the message right away." Working with Lisa Blake, Amanda created humanity's first message to an alien species. They used the same mathematical patterns the Zalari had used, but with human modifications. The message was simple but clear. "We are humans. We received your call for help. We want to help you. How can we reach you?" The message was sent using the most powerful transmitters humanity had. It would take hundreds of years to reach the Zalari, but it was a start. For the first time in human history, Earth had reached out to the stars and said, "We are here, and we care about what happens to you." Lisa Blake watched the transmission leave Aurora Base and disappear into the darkness of space. She did not know if the aliens would ever receive it. She did not know if humanity would ever be able to help them. But she knew that something important had happened. Humanity had heard a cry for help from across the galaxy, and they had answered. That was what humans did. When someone needed help, humans tried to give it, no matter how far away they were or how impossible it seemed. The signal faded into the cosmic background, carrying with it humanity's first words to another species. "We hear you. We will try to help." Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood in the massive construction bay, watching hundreds of workers build humanity's most ambitious project. The ship they were creating was unlike anything humans had ever attempted. It was part human engineering and part alien science, held together by hope and determination. The vessel they were modifying was the heavy cruiser Defiance, one of Earth's most powerful military ships. But the weapons and armor that made it strong in human conflicts meant nothing against the Devourers. What mattered was the experimental drive system Elena was installing in its heart. The dimensional folding technology was based on principles that made most human scientists uncomfortable. Instead of pushing through space like normal ships, the Defiance would temporarily phase out of normal reality and travel through what the Zalari called the Shadow Realm. In this strange dimension, distance worked differently, allowing ships to cross vast spaces in moments. But the technology was dangerous. The old Zalari records showed that 1 ship in 4 never returned from Shadow Realm jumps. Some disappeared completely. Others came back twisted and broken, their crews dead or worse. The Zalari had abandoned the technique after losing too many of their people. Elena knew the risks, but she also knew that humans might succeed where the Zalari had failed. Humans were better at dealing with chaos and uncertainty. They could make decisions quickly when faced with the unknown. Most importantly, they were willing to take risks to help others. Working with her was engineer Marcus Webb, a man who could build anything if given enough materials and time. Marcus had volunteered for the project after reading about the Zalari situation. He had 2 young children at home, but he wanted them to grow up in a galaxy where people helped each other. "The power systems are ready," Marcus reported. "But I have to warn you, we are pushing them beyond their design limits. If anything goes wrong during a jump, the whole ship could be torn apart." Elena nodded. "The Zalari computers show that the Shadow Realm responds to the pilot's mental state. If the crew panics or loses focus, the ship will be lost. We need people who can stay calm no matter what happens." Captain Ben Torres had been training his crew for 6 months, preparing them for a journey unlike anything humans had ever attempted. Ben had chosen his people carefully. They were all volunteers who understood the risks. More importantly, they were all the kind of people who stayed calm during emergencies. Sarah Johnson was the pilot Ben had selected for the mission. She was young, but incredibly skilled, with reflexes faster than almost anyone in the fleet. She had spent weeks learning to use the alien navigation systems and studying the mental disciplines the Zalari used during Shadow Realm travel. "The ship responds to the pilot's thoughts," Sarah explained to her crew. "If I doubt myself or become afraid, the drive will sense it, and we could end up anywhere. I need all of you to stay focused and positive no matter what we see in the HFY Shadow Realm." The first test of the drive system was scheduled for a short jump to the edge of the solar system. If it worked, they would try longer distances. If it failed, they would probably die. Elena made final checks on the drive while Marcus inspected every system on the ship. Admiral Morrison came to watch the test, along with Dr. Amanda Price and dozens of other scientists. Everyone knew they were watching history being made. "Drive systems are online," Elena reported. "Power levels are stable. All safety systems are active." Ben Torres took his position on the bridge of the Defiance. His crew was ready. They had practiced this moment hundreds of times in simulators. But this was real. If they made a mistake, there would be no second chances. "Beginning transition to Shadow Realm," Sarah announced. Her hands moved over the alien controls with careful precision. "Activating dimensional shift in 3, 2, 1. The universe disappeared. For a moment that felt like forever. The Defiance existed in a place that was not a place. The crew could see colors that had no names and hear sounds that came from inside their own minds. Reality twisted around them like a living thing, responding to their thoughts and fears. Sarah fought to keep her mind focused on their destination. She could feel the shadow realm trying to pull the ship in different directions, tempting her to explore the impossible things she could see. But she remembered her training and held steady. Then, suddenly, they were back in normal space. But instead of being near Earth, they were at the edge of the solar system, exactly where they had planned to be. The jump that should have taken months had happened in seconds. "All systems normal," Marcus reported, his voice shaking with excitement. "We did it! We actually did it!" But their celebration was short-lived. 3 hours after the successful jump, the Defiance suffered a massive system failure. The dimensional drive overloaded and nearly exploded, filling the ship with dangerous radiation. 2 crew members were seriously injured, and the ship had to be towed back to Earth for repairs. Elena spent weeks studying what had gone wrong. The problem was not with her design, but with human technology's inability to handle the stresses of dimensional travel. The ship's systems were not strong enough to survive the transition between realities. "We need to rebuild everything," she told Admiral Morrison. "The hull, the power systems, the computers, all of it has to be redesigned for dimensional travel." Morrison looked at the repair estimates and felt his heart sink. "That will take another year, minimum. The Zalari said they only have months before their homeworld falls." Elena had an idea, but it was even more dangerous than the first attempt. "What if we do not try to make the ship survive multiple jumps? What if we build it to make just one journey from Earth to Zalari space and accept that it might not survive the trip?" The plan was desperate and risky. They would strip the Defiance down to its essential systems and rebuild it specifically for a one-way journey. Everything would be focused on getting the ship and its crew to Zalari space alive. Getting home would be a problem for later. Ben Torres volunteered to command the mission despite the risks. "If we can get there and help the Zalari win their war, maybe they can help us build better ships for the return trip," he said. 3 more months of frantic work followed. Elena redesigned the drive system to be more powerful but less stable. Marcus rebuilt the ship's hull using new materials that could better handle dimensional stress. Sarah practiced the jump procedures until she could do them in her sleep. The second test was for a longer jump, to a nearby star system. This time, the Defiance would travel farther than any human ship had ever gone. If it worked, they would know they could reach the Zalari. If it failed, they would lose the ship and everyone aboard. "This is probably our last chance," Elena told Ben before the test. "If this does not work, we will run out of time to help the Zalari." Ben nodded. "Then we had better make it work." The second test began just like the first. The Defiance activated its dimensional drive and slipped into the shadow realm. But this time, the journey was longer and more difficult. The crew fought to stay focused as reality twisted around them. Strange voices seemed to whisper in their ears, trying to distract them from their mission. Sarah held the ship on course, through pure determination. She could feel the shadow realm trying to pull them off path, but she refused to give up. Her crew supported her with their own mental strength, all of them focused on the same goal. When they emerged from the shadow realm, they were in orbit around a star 12 light-years from Earth. They had crossed a distance that should have taken decades in just minutes. But the ship was badly damaged, and several crew members were sick from exposure to dimensional energy. "We can do it," Elena said as she studied the test results. "We can reach the Zalari, but we need to accept that some of our people might not survive the journey." Ben Torres gathered his crew and explained the situation. They would be traveling farther than any human had ever gone, using technology that might kill them, to help people they had never met fight an enemy they did not understand. It was dangerous, uncertain, and possibly suicidal. Every single crew member volunteered to go anyway. The Zalari have been fighting alone for centuries, Ben told them. They sent a message asking for help, and we are going to answer. That is, what humans do. 2 weeks later, the Defiance was ready for its final mission. The ship had been rebuilt one last time, optimized for a single jump across the galaxy. Elena had installed every safety system she could think of, but she knew it might not be enough. As the ship prepared to leave Earth, messages of support came from all over human space. Children sent drawings wishing them luck. Scientists sent new ideas for fighting the Devourers. Soldiers volunteered to join the mission even though there was no room for them. The whole human race is counting on us, Sarah said as she took her position at the navigation controls. Ben Torres looked at his crew one last time. They were brave people who had volunteered for an impossible mission because it was the right thing to do. Whatever happened next, he was proud to serve with them. Beginning final jump to Zalari space, Sarah announced. Destination, Christhia, system, 847 light-years from Earth. The Defiance slipped into the Shadow Realm and began humanity's longest journey into the unknown. The Defiance emerged from the Shadow Realm into a nightmare. Captain Ben Torres stared at the main screen in horror. Where the Zalari had described beautiful crystal worlds orbiting bright stars, he saw only destruction. Entire planets had been stripped down to their cores, leaving behind twisted metal frameworks that pulsed with alien energy. The space around them was filled with geometric ships that moved with cold, mechanical precision. "My God," whispered Sarah Johnson from the pilot's seat. "What happened here?" The answer came from their communications officer who had been trying to contact the Zalari fleet. "Sir, I am receiving a transmission from something called the Veltar. They say they are the surviving Zalari command ship." Ben nodded grimly. "Put them on screen." The being that appeared on their display was unlike anything humans had ever seen. Veltar looked like a creature made of living crystal, beautiful and alien, but clearly exhausted and wounded. When it spoke, its voice had a musical quality that made the translation systems work hard to convert the meaning into human words. "Human ship," Veltar said. "We did not believe you would come. We thought all the other races had abandoned us to die alone. We came as fast as we could," Ben replied. "What is the situation here?" Veltar's crystal body dimmed with sadness. "The Devourers reached our outer world 6 months ago. We have lost 12 planets and most of our fleet. Only a few hundred ships remain, and Christhia itself is under siege." Through the view screen, Ben could see the Zalari homeworld. It was a massive crystal sphere that caught and reflected starlight in beautiful patterns. But even from a distance, he could see the damage. Dark scars marked its surface where Devourer weapons had struck, and parts of the crystal shell were cracked and bleeding light into space. "How long can you hold out?" Ben asked. "Days, perhaps weeks," Veltar said. "The Devourers are preparing for their final assault. When they attack, Christhia will fall, and our people will be extinct." Ben felt anger building in his chest. These beings had fought for centuries to protect not just themselves, but everyone in the galaxy. They deserved better than to die alone while the rest of the universe ignored their sacrifice. "We want to help," Ben said, "but we need to understand what we are fighting. Can you show us how the Devourers operate?" Veltar agreed to guide the Defiance on a reconnaissance mission to observe the enemy. What they saw made even the bravest crew members feel afraid. The Devourers were not like any enemy humans had faced before. They were not angry or cruel or greedy. They were simply machines following their programming. Consume everything. Convert it into more machines. Repeat forever. They had no emotions, no fear, no mercy. They were death itself, given form and intelligence. Intelligence Officer Greg Foster studied the enemy ships through the Defiance's sensors. Each Devourer vessel was a perfect geometric shape, triangles, spheres, and polyhedrons that moved in precise formations. They were beautiful in the way that mathematical equations were beautiful, but they were also terrifying in their cold perfection. "They are incredibly advanced," Greg reported. "Their hull materials are unlike anything in our database. Their weapons appear to work by breaking down matter at the atomic level, and their shields adapt automatically to whatever hits them." Ben watched as a group of Devourer ships approached a damaged Zalari vessel. The Zalari ship fired everything it had. Energy beams that could crack planets, missiles that could destroy moons, weapons that bent space itself. Nothing worked. The Devourer shields absorbed every attack and grew stronger. Then the Devourers struck back. Their weapons reached out like invisible hands and began tearing the Zalari ship apart atom by atom. The beautiful crystal hull dissolved into component elements, which were then drawn into the Devourer ships and converted into new weapons and armor. "They consume their enemies and become stronger," Ben said with disgust. "No wonder the Zalari have been losing. Every ship they lose makes the Devourers more powerful." But Greg had noticed something else. "Captain, look at this. During the conversion process, the Devourer shields flicker. There is a brief moment when they are vulnerable." Ben studied the sensor readings more carefully. Greg was right. For about 30 seconds during each conversion cycle, the Devourer ships had to lower their shields to absorb the matter they were consuming. It was a tiny window of opportunity, but it was something. "The Zalari have tried to exploit this weakness," Veltar explained when Ben asked about it. "But the vulnerability lasts only moments, and the Devourers have learned to coordinate their attacks so they can protect each other during conversion cycles." Ben nodded. The Zalari were excellent scientists and engineers, but they fought wars the same way they did science, carefully, methodically, with detailed plans and precise coordination. That approach had served them well for thousands of years. But it was not working against the Devourers. Humans fought differently. They were adaptable, aggressive, and willing to take risks that other species would consider insane. Maybe that was what this war needed. "We need to study their tactics more closely," Ben decided. "Greg, I want you to monitor every Devourer movement for the next 48 hours. Find patterns. Find weaknesses. Find anything we can use." For 2 days, the Defiance shadowed the Devourer fleet while staying hidden behind the wreckage of destroyed worlds. Greg and his team mapped every enemy movement, timed every action, and analyzed every tactical decision the Devourers made. What they found was both encouraging and terrifying. The Devourers were incredibly powerful, but they were also predictable. They followed the same attack patterns, used the same formations, and made the same tactical choices over and over again. They had learned to defeat the Zalari's careful defensive strategies, but they had never faced an enemy that fought with human unpredictability. "They expect their opponents to retreat when outnumbered," Greg explained to Ben. "They expect coordinated attacks from long range. They expect enemies to try to preserve their forces. They have never fought anyone who charges straight at them or uses suicide tactics. Ben smiled grimly. Humans had been using desperate tactics and impossible odds throughout their history. They had won battles by doing things their enemies thought were too crazy to work. Maybe it was time to show the Devourers what human warfare looked like. But first, they needed to survive long enough to fight back. The Defiance was alone in enemy territory with no support and no way to get home quickly. If they were discovered, the Devourers would destroy them easily. That night, as Ben walked through the ship, he found his crew working with quiet determination. Engineer Marcus Webb was modifying their weapons using Zalari technology. Pilot Sarah Johnson was studying Devourer movement patterns and planning attack runs. Dr. Elena Rodriguez was trying to figure out how to make their dimensional drive work as a weapon. "What are you thinking, Doctor?" Ben asked Elena. Elena looked up from her calculations. "The dimensional drive creates a lot of interference when it operates. If we could overload it deliberately, we might be able to disrupt Devourer systems. It would probably destroy our ship in the process, but it could give the Zalari a chance to attack." Ben felt proud of his crew. They were 800 light-years from home, facing an enemy that had destroyed 17 civilizations, and they were already planning ways to fight back. That was what made humans special. They never gave up, even when the situation looked hopeless. "Keep working on it," Ben told Elena. "But also look for ways we might survive the experience. Dead heroes cannot help anyone." The next day brought bad news. Veltar contacted the Defiance with word that the Devourers were massing for their final assault on Christhia. Thousands of enemy ships were moving into position, enough firepower to crack a planet like an egg. "How long do we have?" Ben asked. 6 days, Veltar replied. "After that, my people will be extinct." Ben looked at his crew. They were just one small ship against an enemy that had conquered most of the galaxy. Any rational person would say they had no chance of making a difference. But humans had never been entirely rational, especially when people needed help. "Then we had better get to work," Ben said. "We have 6 days to figure out how to save a civilization." The war for the galaxy was about to begin, and humanity was ready to fight. Dr. Elena Rodriguez had not slept in 3 days. Her eyes were red and her hands shook from too much coffee, but she kept working. 6 days was not enough time to save a civilization, but it was all they had. The problem seemed impossible. The Devourers had overwhelming numbers, superior technology, and centuries of experience fighting advanced civilizations. The Zalari had already tried everything they could think of, and they were still losing. But Elena had noticed something in the sensor data that gave her hope. When the Defiance had used its dimensional drive near Devourer ships, their formations had become confused for several minutes. The quantum interference from the drive seemed to disrupt their communication systems. "What if we do not try to fight them conventionally?" Elena asked Captain Ben Torres. "What if we use our dimensional technology as a weapon?" Ben was interested but cautious. "Explain what you mean." Elena pulled up her calculations on the main computer. "The Devourers use quantum networks to coordinate their attacks. When our drive operates, it creates interference patterns that scramble their signals. If we could amplify this effect, we might be able to blind their entire fleet." It was a dangerous idea. The dimensional drive was barely stable under normal conditions. Trying to overload it deliberately would probably destroy the Defiance and everyone aboard, but it might also give the Zalari a chance to strike back. Engineer Marcus Webb joined the discussion. He had been working with Zalari scientists to understand their crystal technology, and he had some ideas of his own. The Zalari can grow new crystal matrices very quickly, Marcus explained. If we give them the right patterns, they could build copies of our dimensional drive in a few days. Not as powerful as the original, but strong enough to create interference. Ben understood what they were suggesting. Instead of one ship creating a small disruption, they could coordinate multiple ships to create a much larger effect. It was still risky, but it was better than fighting the Devourers with conventional weapons. "How many ships would we need?" Ben asked. "At least 20, Elena said, and they would all have to activate their drives at exactly the same moment. If the timing is off, the interference patterns will cancel each other out instead of amplifying." Ben contacted Veltar to discuss the plan. The Zalari commander was desperate enough to try anything, but the other Zalari leaders were not sure about trusting human technology. "Your dimensional drive uses principles we abandoned centuries ago," one of the Zalari scientists said. "Those techniques are dangerous and unpredictable. Many of our ships were lost trying to master them." "But they work," Ben pointed out. "We crossed 800 light-years in a few weeks using technology you consider too risky. Maybe it is time to take some risks." The debate among the Zalari leadership lasted for hours. Some wanted to try the human plan. Others thought it was suicide. In the end, Veltar made the decision. "We are dying anyway," the crystal being said. "If there is a chance this could save us, we must try it." Danny Clark, the Defiance's communications officer, worked with Zalari engineers to transfer the dimensional drive specifications to their shipbuilding facilities. The Zalari could grow new ships from crystal seeds in just days, but adapting them to use human technology was more complicated. Meanwhile, Elena was working on an even more dangerous idea. The interference effect was strongest when ships phased in and out of the Shadow Realm during combat. What if human ships could appear inside Devourer formations, attack during the brief vulnerability windows, and phase out before retaliation? "It would require perfect timing and incredible reflexes," she explained to Ben. "The pilot would have to phase in, identify targets, attack, and phase out in less than 30 seconds. And if anything goes wrong, the ship would be destroyed instantly." Ben thought about his crew. They were all skilled professionals, but this would push them beyond their limits. "Who could fly a mission like that?" "I could," said Sarah Johnson, from the doorway. She had been listening to the conversation and had made her decision. "I have been practicing with the dimensional controls for months. I can do this." Ben looked at his young pilot with mixed feelings. Sarah was incredibly talented, but she was also barely 25 years old. Asking her to fly such a dangerous mission felt wrong, but they had no choice. "Sarah, this is not a simulation," Ben warned her. "If you make a mistake, you will die, and your death will not help anyone." Sarah smiled with confidence that was both inspiring and frightening. "Captain, I did not come 800 light-years from home to play it safe. If this is what it takes to help the Zalari, then this is what I will do." Over the next 4 days, Elena and Marcus worked around the clock to modify the Defiance for combat phasing. They stripped out unnecessary systems to make room for more weapons and better shields. They rebuilt the dimensional drive to cycle faster and more precisely. They turned their exploration ship into a weapon unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. At the same time, the Zalari were building their interference ships. Using the human specifications, they grew 20 crystal vessels equipped with modified dimensional drives. The ships were smaller and less stable than the Defiance, but they would serve their purpose. On the 5th day, they ran their first test. The Zalari ships activated their drives in perfect synchronization, creating a wave of quantum interference that disrupted Devourer communications across the entire system. For 10 minutes, the enemy fleet was blind and confused. "It works," Veltar reported with excitement. "The Devourers cannot coordinate their attacks when we create the interference field." But the test also revealed problems. The Zalari ships were not built to handle the stress of dimensional drives. 3 of them suffered system failures during the test, and 1 was completely destroyed when its drive overloaded. "We can only do this once," Elena realized. "The Zalari ships will not survive multiple activations. We get one chance to disrupt their fleet, and then we are back to conventional warfare." Ben gathered his senior officers to plan their attack. They had 17 working Zalari ships and the Defiance. Against them were thousands of Devourer vessels and the most powerful war machines the galaxy had ever seen. The odds were hopeless, but humans had faced hopeless odds before. Marine Colonel Alex Turner had been studying Devourer tactics and had developed a strategy. "The key is timing," he explained. "We create the interference field to blind them, then hit them during their conversion cycles when their shields are down. If we coordinate the attacks perfectly, we might be able to destroy several hundred ships before they adapt." Commander Rachel Price, the Defiance's tactical officer, had been working with Zalari weapons specialists to upgrade their firepower. "We have modified our missiles to carry Zalari quantum cores," she reported. "They will not penetrate Devourer shields, but they might do significant damage during the vulnerability windows." Elena had one more surprise. "I think I can modify our dimensional drive to create a weapons effect. If we phase into normal space inside a Devourer ship, the dimensional shear should tear it apart from the inside." The plan was complex and dangerous. The Zalari ships would create an interference field to blind the Devourer fleet. The Defiance would phase directly into enemy formations and attack during conversion cycles. Other Zalari vessels would provide supporting fire and try to exploit the confusion. It was the kind of desperate all-or-nothing strategy that most military commanders would reject as suicidal. But it was also the kind of plan that humans were good at executing. They specialized in doing impossible things when the situation was desperate enough. "Are we really going to try this?" Marcus asked, as he made final preparations to the ship's systems. Ben looked around at his crew. They were tired, scared, and far from home, but they were also determined to help people who needed saving. That was what made them human. "Yes," Ben said. "We are going to try this, and we are going to succeed, because failure means the death of an entire civilization." On the 6th day, the Devourers began their final assault on Christhia. Thousands of geometric ships moved into attack formation, preparing to destroy the last Zalari stronghold and complete their conquest of this part of the galaxy. They had no idea that a small group of humans and their crystal allies were about to show them what desperation and courage could accomplish. The battle for Christhia was about to begin, and humanity was ready to fight for the survival of their new friends. 2 months had passed since the Defiance's desperate first battle against the Devourers. Captain Ben Torres stood on the bridge of his battered ship, watching as space itself began to twist and bend. New dimensional tiers were opening all around. Christhia and human ships were emerging from the Shadow Realm. The plan that Dr. Elena Rodriguez had started with one experimental vessel had grown into the largest military operation in human history. When word of the successful first strike reached Earth, Admiral Jack Morrison had authorized a massive fleet deployment. Dozens of ships had been rapidly converted with dimensional drives, and thousands of volunteers had signed up for what everyone knew was a one-way mission. Admiral Kyle Stevens commanded the new fleet from his flagship, the Vengeance. He was a veteran of humanity's border wars, a man who understood that sometimes the only way to win was to be willing to lose everything. When he saw the state of the Zalari system, he knew they had arrived just in time. "My God," Stevens said as he studied the tactical display. "How many worlds have been lost?" Ben Torres answered from the Defiance. 15 planets completely consumed, Admiral. The Zalari are down to their last few hundred ships, and Christia itself is barely holding together. Stevens felt anger building in his chest as he looked at the destruction the Devourers had caused. Entire civilizations had been wiped out to feed these machines. Beautiful worlds had been reduced to metal frameworks and geometric horror. It was not war, it was extinction made systematic. "All ships, this is Admiral Stevens," he broadcast to the human fleet. "We came here to help the Zalari, and we are going to do exactly that. The Devourers think they can consume everything in their path, but they have never faced human determination. Today, we show them what happens when you threaten our friends." The human fleet consisted of 43 ships of various sizes, from heavy cruisers like the Vengeance to small fighters that could barely carry one person. All of them had been equipped with dimensional drives based on Elena's original design. All of them were crewed by volunteers who understood they might never see Earth again. Captain Jake Morrison, no relation to the Admiral, commanded a squadron of the new phase fighters. These were small, fast ships designed specifically for hit and run, attacks on Devourer vessels. Jake was young and aggressive, the kind of pilot who saw impossible odds as a personal challenge. "Fighter squadron ready for combat, Admiral," Jake reported. "We have been studying the sensor data from the first battle. We think we can use our size and speed to get inside their defenses." Commander Lisa Hayes led the engineering corps, specialists who had volunteered to repair and modify ships under combat conditions. She had studied everything the Defiance crew had learned about fighting the Devourers, and she had some new ideas about how to improve their chances. "We have been working on something we call phase bombs," Lisa explained to Stevens. "Small devices that can be planted inside Devourer ships during phase insertions. When they detonate, they create dimensional tears that should destroy the target from inside." The arrival of the human fleet had given the Zalari new hope, but Veltar was also worried. The crystal being had watched 17 civilizations try to fight the Devourers, and all of them had eventually failed. Even with human help, the odds were still overwhelming. "The Devourers have been studying your tactics," Veltar warned Stevens. "They adapt quickly to new threats. The surprise attack that worked for the Defiance may not work again." Stevens nodded. "That is why we brought more ships and new strategies. Humans are good at adapting, too. Every time the enemy changes their approach, we will change ours." The first major test of the expanded human fleet came when the Devourers launched a massive assault on the remaining Zalari defensive positions. Thousands of geometric ships moved in perfect formation, ready to complete their conquest of the Crystal Civilization. But this time, they faced something they had never encountered before: human combined arms tactics. While the Zalari ships created interference fields to disrupt Devourer communications, human vessels used their dimensional drives to appear throughout the enemy formation. Some ships attacked directly, using phase technology to strike at vulnerable targets. Others deployed teams of engineers to plant phase bombs on enemy vessels. Still others provided covering fire and rescued damaged Allied ships. Captain Torres now leading a squadron of modified cruisers, coordinated the attack from the Defiance. All ships, remember the timing, hit them during their conversion cycles, then phase out before they can respond. Do not try to be heroes. Dead pilots cannot help anyone. The battle was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human ships appeared and disappeared like ghosts, striking where the enemy least expected and vanishing before retaliation could arrive. Devourer vessels, designed to fight conventional fleets, found themselves unable to target enemies that refused to stay in one place long enough to be hit. Jake Morrison's fighter squadron proved especially effective. The small ships could phase directly inside Devourer formations, plant explosives, and escape in seconds. It is like fighting from inside their own fleet, Jake reported with excitement. They cannot hit us without hitting themselves, but the human tactics came with a cost. Dimensional drives were still experimental and dangerous. Several ships were lost when their drives malfunctioned during combat phases. Others suffered massive system failures when the stress of rapid dimensional transitions overloaded their power systems. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, now serving as Fleet Technical Advisor, worked frantically to solve the drive problems. "We are pushing the technology beyond its limits," she warned Stevens. "We need to find ways to make the drives more stable, or we will lose ships faster than we can replace them." The solution came from an unexpected source. The Zalari, inspired by human innovation, began experimenting with hybrid technologies that combined crystal matrices with human dimensional systems. The result was more stable and efficient than either technology alone. "Your willingness to take risks has taught us something important," Veltar explained to Stevens. "We have been too careful, too focused on perfection, sometimes imperfect. Solutions that work are better than perfect solutions that never get tried." Over the following weeks, human and Zalari engineers worked together to develop new weapons and tactics. They created phase torpedoes that could strike targets in multiple dimensions simultaneously. They built crystal-enhanced fighters that could phase more frequently without system failures. They developed new coordination techniques that allowed mixed human-Zalari squadrons to fight as unified forces. But the Devourers were adapting too. They began using new defensive formations that made phase attacks more difficult. They developed weapons that could track ships through dimensional transitions. Most ominously, they started building new types of vessels specifically designed to counter human tactics. "They are learning from every battle," Intelligence Officer Greg Foster reported. "Each time we develop a new strategy, they create countermeasures within days. We are in an arms race against an enemy that has the resources of entire star systems." The war reached a critical point when Devourer scouts discovered the location of Earth. Using captured data from human ships, they had traced the dimensional signatures back to humanity's homeworld. A massive enemy fleet began moving toward human space, intent on destroying the source of the resistance. Admiral Stevens faced an impossible choice. He could keep his fleet in Zalari space and continue fighting to save Christhia, or he could return to defend Earth. Either way, one civilization would probably be destroyed. The decision was made for him when new dimensional tiers began opening throughout the system. More human ships were arriving, not just military vessels, but converted civilian ships, volunteer crews, and anyone who could carry weapons into space. "This is Admiral Morrison aboard the Retribution," came a familiar voice over the communications system. "Sorry we are late to the party. We brought friends." The reinforcement fleet was even larger than Stevens's original force. It included converted cargo ships carrying experimental weapons, civilian transports loaded with volunteers, and even some older vessels that had been pulled out of mothballs and equipped with dimensional drives. But more importantly, it included new technology. Earth's scientists had been working around the clock to improve dimensional drive systems, and they had achieved some remarkable breakthroughs. The new drives were faster, more stable, and capable of effects that previous generations could not achieve. "We have enough ships to fight on two fronts," Morrison explained to Stevens. "Half the fleet will stay here to help the Zalari finish off the local Devourer forces. The other half will return to Earth and prepare our defenses." Stevens looked at the tactical display, which now showed hundreds of human ships scattered throughout the system. They were still outnumbered by the Devourers, but for the first time since arriving in Zalari space, he felt like they had a real chance of winning. "All right," Stevens said. "Let us finish what we started. The Devourers wanted to consume everything in their path, but they made one mistake. They threatened our friends, and humans do not abandon their friends." The final battle for Christhia was about to begin, and humanity was ready to show the galaxy what they could accomplish when they fought together. Lieutenant Colonel Maria Santos had been a Marine for 15 years, but she had never fought a battle like this one. Standing in the command center of the assault ship Thunderbolt, she watched as her Ghost Squadron prepared for the most dangerous mission of the war. The Ghost Squadron was Maria's own creation, a unit of 12 ships that could coordinate their dimensional phases to appear in multiple locations at the same time. Using advanced timing systems and quantum entanglement communication, they could make the Devourers think they were facing 3 or 4 times as many enemies as were actually attacking. "Remember, timing is everything," Maria told her pilots, over the communication system. "We phase in at target Alpha, launch our attacks, then immediately phase to target Beta. Keep moving, keep shooting, and do not give them time to figure out what we are doing." The technique required incredible skill and coordination. Each pilot had to trust their teammates completely, knowing that a mistimed phase could result in 2 ships trying to occupy the same space, with catastrophic results for both. Captain Jake Morrison, now leading the Advanced Fighter Wing, had developed his own innovations. His fighters carried what engineer Peter Hayes called phase bombs, devices that could be planted inside enemy ships during dimensional insertions. When the bombs detonated, they created tears in space itself, destroying Devourer vessels from the inside out. "Approaching target zone," Jake reported as his squadron prepared for another strike. "Enemy formation looks like they are expecting us this time. They have modified their defensive patterns." That was the problem they all faced. The Devourers learned from every encounter, adapting their tactics and technology to counter human innovations. What worked in one battle might be useless in the next. The war had become a deadly contest of innovation, with each side desperately trying to stay ahead of the other. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, now coordinating fleet technical operations from the flagship Vengeance, was working on humanity's latest breakthrough. By studying captured Devourer technology, she had discovered that their quantum communication networks had a fundamental weakness. "They use a centralized command structure," Elena explained to Admiral Stevens. "All their ships receive orders from a small number of command nodes. If we can locate and destroy those nodes, their entire fleet will lose coordination. The challenge was finding the command nodes among thousands of enemy ships. Devourer vessels all looked similar, and their command ships were designed to blend in with the rest of the fleet. Traditional sensors could not distinguish between them, but humanity had one advantage. The Devourers had not anticipated. Human intuition and pattern recognition were better than any computer system. pilots like Sarah Johnson, who had been fighting, the Devourers for months had developed an almost supernatural ability to identify important enemy ships by their behavior patterns. "That one," Sarah said, pointing to a ship on the tactical display. "The triangular vessel in the center of Formation 7. It has been giving orders to the other ships for the past hour. Admiral Stevens trusted his people's judgment more than sensor data. Go squadron, new target. Take out that command ship." Maria Santos led her 12 ships in a coordinated assault on the suspected command vessel. They phased in from 6 different directions simultaneously, overwhelming the ship's defenses with multiple attacks. When the command ship exploded, the surrounding Devourer vessels lost coordination for several minutes, long enough for the human fleet to destroy dozens of them. But the Devourers adapted quickly. Within hours, they had shifted to a more distributed command structure that was harder to disrupt. The war continued its deadly dance of innovation and counter-innovation. The turning point came when engineer Peter Hayes developed a new type of weapon that combined human dimensional technology with Zalari crystal matrices. The phase torpedoes could exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, allowing them to bypass Devourer shields entirely. The torpedoes phase through their defenses and detonate inside their hull, Peter explained. No matter how strong their shields are, they cannot stop weapons that attack from another dimension. The first test of the phase torpedoes was spectacular. A single human destroyer used them to destroy 3 Devourer capital ships in minutes. The enemy fleet, which had seemed invincible for so long, suddenly appeared vulnerable. But even as humanity gained new advantages, the Devourers were preparing their own surprises. Intelligence reports suggested they were building new types of ships designed specifically to counter human dimensional technology. Worse, they had been studying captured human vessels and learning how to build their own dimensional drives. "We are facing an enemy that can copy our technology and improve on it," warned Intelligence Officer Greg Foster. "If this war continues much longer, they will gain every advantage we have, plus their superior numbers and resources." Admiral Stevens knew that Foster was right. Humanity had achieved temporary superiority through innovation and surprise, but the Devourers would eventually adapt to everything humans could do. The war had to be won quickly, or it would be lost slowly. The opportunity came when Devourer forces split their attention between 2 targets. Part of their fleet was still trying to complete the conquest of Christia, while another massive force was heading toward Earth to eliminate the source of human resistance. Stevens made a bold decision. Instead of trying to defend both locations, he would concentrate everything on a massive assault against the Devourer fleet threatening Earth. If humanity could win a decisive victory there, it might break the enemy's ability to continue the war. "All ships, we are going home," Stevens announced to the fleet. "The Devourers think they can destroy Earth while we are busy here. They are about to learn what happens when you threaten humanity's home world." The journey back to Earth was the largest dimensional fleet movement in history. Nearly 200 human and Zalari ships phased through the Shadow Realm together, their combined drives creating interference patterns that could be detected across half the galaxy. Captain Ben Torres, still commanding the Defiance after all these months, led one of the advanced squadrons. His ship had been rebuilt and upgraded multiple times, but it was showing the strain of constant combat. Like its crew, the Defiance had been pushed beyond its limits, but it kept fighting because the alternative was unthinkable. Approaching Earth system, Torres reported as his squadron emerged from the Shadow Realm. "Enemy fleet is in position for assault on the home world. Estimated strength? My God, there are thousands of them." The Devourer fleet surrounding Earth was the largest anyone had ever seen. It included not just the geometric ships humans had become familiar with, but new designs that incorporated stolen human technology. Some of the enemy vessels were using dimensional drives, making them far more dangerous than previous generations. But humanity had prepared for this moment. Earth's orbital defenses had been upgraded with the latest dimensional technology. The planet itself was protected by a network of phase generators that could make it temporarily intangible. Most importantly, every human ship in the galaxy was converging on the Sol system for the final battle. "This is it," Admiral Stevens said, as he surveyed the massive fleets preparing for combat. "Everything we have learned, everything we have built, everything we are fighting for comes down to this moment." Commander Lisa Hayes, now leading the expanded engineering corps, made final preparations to the fleet's dimensional systems. "All ships report ready for combat operations," she announced. "Phase drives are synchronized and operating at maximum efficiency." Dr. Elena Rodriguez activated the experimental weapon systems she had been developing for months. "Planet-wide phase field generators are online," she reported. "If necessary, we can make Earth itself disappear from normal space for several minutes." Admiral Morrison, commanding the defensive fleet from the Retribution, coordinated with orbital, weapons platforms, and ground-based installations. "Earth defenses are ready. We have been preparing for this fight since the day we learned about the Devourers." As the two fleets moved toward each other, every human in the system knew they were witnessing history being made. This would be the battle that determined whether humanity survived as a free species, or whether Earth became another dead world in the Devourers' path of destruction. The Devourers had destroyed 17 civilizations. They had consumed entire star systems and turned them into weapons. They had never been stopped, never been defeated, never been forced to retreat, but they had never fought humans defending their homeworld. The final battle was about to begin, and the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. The final battle began at dawn over Earth, as humanity's star cast long shadows across the orbital defense platforms. Admiral Kyle Stevens watched from the bridge of the Vengeance as thousands of Devourer ships moved into attack formation, their geometric hulls reflecting sunlight like deadly jewels. "All ships, this is Admiral Stevens," he broadcast to the combined human and Zalari fleet. "Today we fight not just for Earth, but for every world that has fallen to the Devourers. Today we fight for the future of life itself in this galaxy." The Devourer assault began with a coordinated strike on Earth's orbital defenses. Energy beams that could crack planets reached out toward the defensive platforms, while waves of smaller ships prepared to land on the surface. It was the same pattern they had used to destroy 17 other civilizations. But Earth was ready for them. Commander Lisa Hayes activated the planet-wide phase field generators that Dr. Elena Rodriguez had spent months perfecting. Earth itself flickered and became translucent as the dimensional field took effect. The massive Devourer energy beams passed harmlessly through the planet, striking nothing but empty space. "Phase field is holding," Elena reported from her position in the underground command center. "Earth is effectively invisible to conventional weapons for the next 10 minutes. While Earth remained intangible, human ships phased into normal space throughout the Devourer formation. Captain Jake Morrison led his fighter squadron in a desperate assault on the enemy command ships, using phase bombs to destroy their communication networks from the inside. "Target the big ones first," Jake ordered his pilots. "If we can blind their command structure, their smaller ships will lose coordination." The battle became a three-dimensional maze of phasing ships, energy weapons, and exploding vessels. Human. Pilots used their dimensional drives to appear inside enemy formations, attack, and disappear before retaliation could arrive. Zalari ships provided covering fire with their crystal weapons, while their commanders learned to appreciate the chaotic beauty of human tactics. Captain Ben Torres, commanding the veteran crew of the Defiance, led a squadron of heavy cruisers in a direct assault on the largest Devourer vessels. His ship had been modified so many times that it barely resembled its original design, but it still carried the determination of its crew. "All ships concentrate fire on the central command cluster," Torres ordered. "If we can take out their primary coordination node, the whole attack will fall apart." But the Devourers had learned from previous battles. They had developed new weapons, specifically designed to track ships through dimensional transitions. Several human vessels were destroyed when they tried to phase out of combat, caught between dimensions by enemy interference fields. Lieutenant Colonel Maria Santos adapted quickly to the changing situation. Her Ghost Squadron abandoned their multi-location tactics and instead focused on rapid-fire attacks against single targets. "New plan," she announced to her pilots. "Hit them fast and hard, then use conventional maneuvering to escape. Do not rely on the dimensional drives until we figure out their countermeasures." The battle raged for hours, with neither side able to gain a decisive advantage. Human innovation and determination were matched against Devourer overwhelming numbers and superior technology. Ships on both sides were destroyed in spectacular explosions that lit up the space around Earth. The turning point came when Dr. Elena Rodriguez realized that the Devourer anti-phase weapons had a fatal flaw. They were designed to disrupt dimensional transitions, but they could not affect ships that were already in the Shadow Realm. "I have an idea," Elena announced over the command channel. "What if we phase an entire squadron into the Shadow Realm and keep them there during their attack run? The Devourers cannot target what exists in a different dimension." Captain Nicole Adams, commanding the assault cruiser Freedom, volunteered her ship for the experimental tactic. "My crew is ready to try it. If it works, we can hit their command ships without worrying about their defenses." The Freedom and 3 escort vessels phased into the Shadow Realm and stayed there, existing as ghosts that could observe the battle but not be observed in return. They moved through the Devourer formation, like spirits, identifying the most important targets. "We can see their command structure," Adams reported from the Shadow Realm. "There are 5 primary control ships coordinating the entire assault. If we can destroy all 5 simultaneously, their fleet will lose all coordination." Stevens made the decision that would end the war. "All available ships prepare for coordinated strike on command targets. We get one chance at this. The attack was perfectly timed." The Freedom Squadron phased back into normal space inside the Devourer command formation and destroyed all 5 control ships with phase bombs. At the same moment, human and Zalari forces throughout the battle zone concentrated their fire on secondary command vessels. The effect was immediate and devastating. Thousands of Devourer ships suddenly stopped moving in coordinated patterns. Some continued attacking on their own, but many simply drifted in space, waiting for orders that would never come. "Their quantum network is collapsing," Elena reported with excitement. "The command destruction is cascading through their entire communication system. Ships across the galaxy are losing contact with each other." But the battle was not over. Even without coordination, the Devourers were still individually dangerous. The fighting continued as human ships hunted down enemy vessels one by one, while Earth's defenses protected the planet from random attacks. The end came when Admiral Morrison, commanding the Retribution, led a final assault against the largest Devourer ship in the system. The massive vessel was the size of a small moon, covered with weapons that could destroy entire fleets. But it was also the primary quantum relay for this part of the galaxy. "All ships, concentrate fire on that thing," Morrison ordered. "If we can take it down, we might be able to shut down Devourer operations across multiple star systems." The assault on the massive ship required everything humanity had learned about fighting the Devourers. Ships phased in and out of the attack, formation, plant bombs, and disappeared before retaliation could arrive. Zalari vessels provided covering fire, while human engineers worked to overload the ship's quantum communication systems. Captain Torres led the final assault, phasing the Defiance directly into the heart of the massive vessel. "This is for everyone who died fighting these things," he said, as his crew planted the largest phase bomb they had ever built. The explosion that followed could be seen from Earth's surface. The massive Devourer ship simply ceased to exist, taking with it the quantum relay network that had coordinated enemy operations across the galaxy. The remaining Devourer ships became isolated and confused, easy targets for the combined human and Zalari fleets. In the aftermath of the battle, Admiral Stevens stood on the observation deck of the Vengeance, looking out at the wreckage that filled space around Earth. Hundreds of ships had been destroyed on both sides, and thousands of people had died to achieve this victory. But it was a victory. For the first time in galactic history, the Devourers had been stopped. Their seemingly unstoppable advance had been broken by the determination of two species who refused to give up on each other. "Admiral," Commander Hayes reported, "we are receiving communications from across the galaxy. The Devourer shutdown is complete. Their ships everywhere have stopped functioning." Stevens nodded, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. "What about survivors? Are there other civilizations that managed to hide from the Devourers?" The answer came over the following weeks as monitoring stations across human space detected new signals from distant stars. The galaxy was not as empty as everyone had thought. Dozens of species had survived by hiding in remote systems or underground shelters, waiting for the terror to pass. One by one, these hidden civilizations began to emerge and make contact with Earth and Christhia. They had heard about the great battle and the species that had finally stopped the Devourers. They wanted to meet the humans and Zalari who had saved the galaxy. Dr. Amanda Price, now elderly but still leading humanity's diplomatic efforts, smiled as she read the translation of the latest message. It was from a species called the Vorthon, who had been hiding in asteroid fields for 200 years. "We heard your call echoing across the stars," the message said. "You said that when someone needs help, humanity answers. We need help rebuilding our world. Will you come?" Amanda looked at the star chart showing the location of the Vorthon system. It was 600 light-years away, but with improved dimensional drives, human ships could reach it in weeks. More importantly, it was another chance to help people who needed assistance. She walked to the communications center and began composing humanity's response. "This is Dr. Amanda Price of Earth Command," she said. "We received your message and your request for help. A rescue fleet will depart within the week. When someone calls for help, humanity answers. Admiral Morrison, now promoted to Fleet Admiral, in recognition of his role in saving Earth, was already preparing the next wave of missions. Construction shipyards were working around the clock to build new vessels equipped with the latest dimensional technology. Thousands of volunteers were signing up for exploration and assistance missions to distant worlds.